Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside the FLX. I'm Josh Durso, and as always, we are coming to you from the FingerLakes1.com studio in downtown Seneca Falls. We have an exciting show today as Geneva City Manager Matt Horn and Director of Neighborhood Initiatives Sage Gerling join us in studio to talk about some of the great news that has come out of Geneva in the last few weeks. Guys, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get into any of the nitty-gritty about all of this great news, I got to start out. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, starting with you, Sage. Ladies first. Sorry, Matt.
That's all.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal background, how you got into Geneva.
Sure. I grew up in Texas, in Austin, big city, and only lived in big cities until I decided to go back to grad school and ended up in Ithaca in the beautiful Finger Lakes. And I think about a year in, I was like, maybe not having tall buildings around me is not so bad. And I met my husband there, and we made a choice to stay in the Finger Lakes. He grew up in Geneva, and we looked at Portland, Oregon, and Geneva were our last two picks, and we thought we could really have a good quality life here. We could be near family, and it was really good for my career, which was planning and landscape architecture, so we decided to stay.
That's awesome. Matt?
I actually grew up in Virginia. I spent my entire career before I got to Geneva in the Southeast. I went to James Madison, studied public administration, worked in South Carolina in a little city called Beaufort, which was the county seat of the county where Hilton Head is. Worked in Beaufort for a while and then went to Atlanta, where I worked for a private company that handled outsourcing of municipal outsourcing for municipal entities. So the city I worked in there was a startup city. It had just been chartered in 2006, and they asked us to come in and set up a whole city government that was privately based. So I was a private contractor. There were no city employees except the city manager. He managed a bunch of contracts, and I really enjoyed it. It was the kind of place where you didn't have a way you always did things, right? Because we were starting brand new. But as happens, our family was coming along. I'd gone to Atlanta. My oldest was born, and my wife was from the Finger Lakes. Her family's in Romulus, and we were expecting our second son. And her take was, I could be a stay-at-home mom thousands of miles away from my family with one, but not with two. So we tried to get closer to home, and the Geneva job opened up. I took a shot at it. I'd never been a city manager before. I'd been an assistant and a department head, but this looked like a neat opportunity, and I've been here ever since, about 8 years.
And one of the things, before we get into anything else, one of the things everyone that I've talked to is saying that optimism is your sort of hook, line, and sinker with everyone. It was how you landed the job, the whole 9 yards. Talk to us a little bit about that sort of attitude that you've applied to how you do your job.
Yeah, well, the last thing we want to do is give up on Geneva or give up on anything. Geneva has had its struggles, certainly. It was a boom town in the 50s and 60s. Geneva's where you went when you were going shopping, when you were going out to dinner. That's where you went. And over the years, between globalization of industry and just economic downturn, Geneva took its knocks. And so one of the things I loved about Geneva was it reminded me of home. My hometown went through a similar set of trials. And what I watched over time was I watched people give up. And so I committed after school and in each job I went to just never, always looking for the solution. Every problem has a solution. It's always done best from a team standpoint. And I came into Geneva looking at its assets. A lot of people stopped me, certainly people from the region, who said, "Oh, Geneva's got these challenges: a lot of property off the tax roll, a lot of social issues that look. There's a lot of places in the Finger Lakes look around, but Geneva, from my standpoint, had these incredible assets between the lake. It's a real working city, a huge industrial base with Guardian Glass and Zotos. And it's not a one-trick pony, It's someplace that you could really make something out of. And I found a group of people, including Sage and the city council that hired me, and each city council after that, who Steve Valentino, one of our counselors, call them Geneva believers. And that's what I am, and that's kind of what keeps me around. Is I feel like we're onto something here. And so, yeah, I'm a Geneva believer for sure, and I think our assets far outweigh any challenges that we're going to face.
Now, Sage, you said the final choice for you and your husband was Portland, Oregon, or Geneva, New York.
Correct.
How do you wind up finalizing between two places on opposite sides of the country?
Yeah, I failed to mention my husband is an enologist, so he's in the wine industry.
Okay.
And so Portland and Geneva have those two characteristics of good winemaking and good planning. And so that's kind of how we narrowed down those two choices. But it was an obvious choice to choose Geneva for multiple fronts in terms of size, scale, being, working and living and playing all within a very small radius in a beautiful setting, having family nearby, and then being able to make change and see it. So for someone that's in a field that's community development, to be able to make recommendations, put them into action, and not always do a great job, right? I mean, sometimes we have great successes, but doing that at a scale that you could say, let's go down a different road. We tried this, we learned this from this. This was a good, approach, but we could have done it better, and be able to turn the ship very easily. And that's what kind of Geneva provides on the.
Now, you guys have had no shortage of good news recently. Lots of successes downtown, the $10 million Downtown Revitalization Initiative Award. Talk to us a little bit about that specifically, what your involvement was in the process, and then sort of what it was like when you found out that it came through.
Sure. Well, we heard about it. We heard that the governor was going to make a pretty significant investment in downtowns very early in the year. He announced it as part of his economic pillars, his economic strategies for the year. So it came out. We didn't hear much after that, and we kind of waited for details. Around early to mid-May, we got the details on what the challenge would be, and it was effectively tell us why Geneva is the right place for investment. It was different than any grant program we'd been involved in. It didn't ask us to list out a bunch of projects that we were going to take on. It basically said, what have you done for the last 10 years? And where would you like to be? Thankfully, we had just gone through this comprehensive planning process, and it's been an 18-month process where we really went out and grabbed every corner of the community that we could find and involved people and asked them what they'd like to see. So first of all, we had a ton of data already on hand. From that, we had a lot of great public input and consensus on where we should be going. And so the application kind of started to write itself as in terms of where we wanted to go. But we also have these great successes that we're able to build upon over the last 10 to 15 years. We've been pretty aggressive in pursuing grants, and that started before I got to Geneva. That was something that the city had been skilled at moving from the 90s into the 21st century. And a lot of that focus was on downtown. So we showed this buildup of here's the investment that the state made in 2006, and here's how we capitalized on it, and in 2008 and in 2009. Better yet, here are the plans that the state funded, and here's how we acted upon them and saw successes. Virtually every success we've had has been because we planned it, we took community input, we executed on a plan, and we got the dividend from it. And so we're not a haphazard community. We don't go ramshackle into a neighborhood or into downtown and say we should try this. It's thought out and it's executed well. And as Sage points out, it's on an actionable scale. So when we make an investment, the impact is seen. And so we were able to show as part of the application that we have taken $9 million of state investment and doubled it over the last 10 years. And if you go back just a few more years before that to the days of the Lions Bank and Hampton Inn projects, it's more than double. It's 2.5 or 3 times what the state invested, which is incredible. And so we took that, packaged it up, and put forward an early draft. But we started to think about one of the things that came out of the comprehensive plan was a counterintuitive piece that our poverty rate is growing. We're getting poorer in the face of all of these great wins that we've had over the years. Our downtown looks great. Our industrial park's full. The tech farm, Hobart and William Smith colleges, all of these things are working in our favor, but we're still losing ground in the poverty war. So one of the governor's big focuses is anti-poverty, and that lines right up with Rochester and the Finger Lakes Regional Council's strategies. And so we made sure to showcase, and we told it kind of along the lines of Tale of Two Cities. We've got all these great successes, but on the other side of town, just up the street, a block or two into downtown, you can find these pockets of poverty that are challenging. So we wrapped all that up into an application package. Sage and I read it and rewrote it more times than we want to remember now, but we had to submit it within 30 days. They said submit it on Thursday and we'll let you know Monday if you're a finalist. And Monday we sat around and we didn't get a call, and we were frustrated and upset. And then about 6 o'clock that night, Sage called me and said, "Did you see your email? We're a finalist." But that was Monday, and they said, "You got to come to Rochester on Thursday. You're one of 4. We knew that 10 had submitted. We were one of 4 finalists. Then they said, "We'll let you know. You should hear from us by the end of the month." And June 30th came and went, and July 1st came and went, and the day we found out was the day the governor came to town. They called us about 11 o'clock that morning and said, take a few seconds to celebrate and then get ready to plan a huge event. And we got about 200 people into the visitor center, the event center, and he made the announcement. So it was fast. It was a rush, and it really did take into account all of the successes we've had and our planning process. I left out the best part, which is the presentation we had to make as a finalist. We wanted to showcase the people who have taken a chance on Geneva in the last 10 years, the people who have invested, and the people who will be most affected by this grant. And so we reached out to the president of Hobart and William Smith Colleges, Mark Gearin. We reached out to Bob Schick, who's the president of Lions National Bank, who had just located a 50-person operations center in downtown. Hobart and William Smith has just put 75 administrative staffers in downtown. And so these are 2 guys who saw something in downtown and invested. But then, of course, Sage and I were part of the team. But I think the icing on the cake was a woman, Alana Overstreet Gibson, who is a program manager at the Boys and Girls Club. And she grew up in Geneva in Courtyard Apartments, which subsidized housing. She told incredible stories about growing up in poverty in Geneva and walking to the grocery store, and everybody in the family has to go because they have to carry the bags back on their arms. Everybody's got to carry 3 or 4 bags. And on laundry day, everybody has to go because we have to carry the baskets down to the laundromat because nobody has a car. And she prided herself on being the first person in her family to have a car and the first person in her family to graduate from Hobart and William Smith, to graduate from college. And so honestly, I felt anyway, I don't know what the judges thought, but I felt that was the sales pitch right there, was that these dollars aren't going to go to some brushed up, polished up amenity on the lakeshore. These are going to this is going to touch 13,000 people, and it's going to change some lives. And I guess the judges agreed, and we're here today, ready to take on the $10 million challenge.
Now, what are some of the things, if either one of you could talk to us a little bit about, what are some of the things that are in this comprehensive plan that people would wind up seeing materialize throughout the city? Are there specific sort of check marks that you guys are going to box off as you go, or is it something where you have larger goals that you're sort of striving towards?
Sure. So what I like most about this plan is it's really a decision-making guide. And so I'll get to some priorities that we've kind of identified, but there's an overarching kind of 2 elements that are important. One is a vision. Like, where do we want to be as a community? And one is beautiful and prosperous, equitable, connected, and sustainable. So, and those have multiple different, meanings that you can take into them. And it doesn't mean that we haven't hit some of those so far, but we decided that is, as a community, that we wanted to really strive to be those 5 words. The second is a set of values that we really want to kind of guide our policies and our actions. And so we're not going to know today everything that we want to do tomorrow. And so what do we have in place to make sure that we will still be who we want to be. And those are the core values, like your core essence of who you are. And one is being stewards of our natural setting. Mm-hmm. We're in this beautiful location with Seneca Lake. Yeah. We've got the agricultural resources, just at our feet, right outside of the city, and we really want to preserve those, and that's important to us. We also have this uniquely urban character. We are not a vanilla community in all senses of the word. We've got this great niche of a downtown element with all these events going on and all this activity. We have people with all different backgrounds. We've got our old Italians, but we've got our Puerto Rican, Syrian, all these different mix of wonderful people that are coming and have lived in Geneva that make us really vibrant. And so uniquely urban, we could spend a whole half an hour just talking about all the nuances of the details of what make us uniquely urban. But coming from only living in big cities, I'm often just pinching myself saying, we have so much going on and so much resources available to us that a big city has. Mm-hmm. And I think I almost say it weekly on so many different fronts. But our multicultural heritage, so I touched a little bit that makes us uniquely urban, but really we come from very diverse backgrounds, and we want to continue to celebrate that and really nurture that and not lose that as we move forward and grow. And then our arts and our our architectural kind of wonderful assets. The Smith Opera House. We have a really wonderful housing stock. We have a really old housing stock that needs work, but if you really dive into it, we have a beautiful housing stock, and beautiful downtown buildings and core that we really want to make sure stays intact and improves. And then our economy. So bottom line, we have to be fiscally strong. We're getting there, not just us as a city, but as all of our residents as well. So those things are all tied to policies and action guides of what we will, we don't do. And that's, we've already used it as a tool when we're trying to say, are we going to go after this grant? Are we going to do this program? How does it forward? How does it align with our values and vision? And then we have priorities. So we kind of have 5 areas. The lakefront, and we our downtown. That's a no-brainer there. We also have our corridors. So when you come into the city, you have Route 14, you have 5 and 20. Does it really speak to Geneva? Are those healthy corridors? Are they providing for our residents, for our tourists? What is it saying about Geneva? And then Castle Street is also a corridor, which you might not think about as being a corridor, but it links from the lakefront through downtown, through several neighborhoods to the experiment station. And Cornell is at one of our anchor kind of institutions, and so that also becomes a key corridor. And then housing. So we really have a focus too on improving our housing stock to attract residents, to retain residents, to just improve the health, overall vibrancy of all of our neighborhoods as well. And then the last one is economic advancement. Okay. So we do understand about our poverty rate. We understand that some of our residents aren't necessarily being able to have a high quality of life because of their economic situation. So being able to set in place some programs and actions that might advance.
Now, one of the things you mentioned there is obviously Seneca Lake. You've both talked about Seneca Lake a great deal. One of the things that has been talked about is sort of linking Seneca Lake and downtown when you have, as Matt pointed out before we came on the air, a giant 5-lane highway in between the two. Talk to us a little bit about just sort of the challenge of that, what that's like.
Well, we've got these 2 incredible assets. We've got downtown, which is at 85% occupancy. A lot of people living downtown. A ton of people working downtown. 1,500 people work downtown. 220 firms. So there's this big economic engine there. Then the lakefront, we have this incredible civic amenity. We've invested a ton of money in partnership with the state to create parks and trails and docks and boardwalks all along the lakefront, the visitor center, the events center, millions and millions of dollars worth of investment. And then you have 5 and 20. And 5 and 20 just slices them right in half. And we like to think about it, our vision for it is one cohesive district, one single economic engine, downtown on the lakefront. And so the challenge really is how to get folks both visually connected. Part of not crossing 5 and 20 is you look down Castle Street and all you see is asphalt, all the way to the lake, and so we're working on visual connections now. But part of it is functional, and as we talked about, there is nothing that tells you to slow down, particularly if you're coming off of uptown into downtown and out towards Seneca County. You got the lake in front of you, the breezes are blowing in your hair, and the hammer's down, right? And you're moving. And so that's what that road was built for, by the way. I mean, it's called the arterial highway. I mean, it was built to move trucks around downtown, to get the traffic around downtown. And I got to tell you, my absolute lowest priority these days is getting people out of Geneva. I want to find a way to keep them here and find a way to help them understand what's exciting about Geneva. So our thoughts now, our focus now is on making it safer and a more fun environment for pedestrians, for cyclists, for the disabled, the physically disabled. If you're in a wheelchair or a walker, you're not even going to take a chance. It's not going to happen. And so we want to find a way to get across there and to do it without ignoring the fact that 5 and 20, the way it is today, is a problem. And so we've got a lot of ideas, and we're looking for a lot of ideas.
Now, one of the successes, it seems as though it has been a big success, is the Linden Street. We'll call it experiment, I guess, because you sort of closed off 4 parts of the year now. Talk to us a little bit about what that was like, getting that pushed through, and then sort of now seeing the results, the good results. Yeah.
Well, one of the things we do in Geneva is listen. We try not to make decisions from the top down, and so we've got this civic innovation, civic engagement focus. And last year, actually, towards the end of the year, the Linden Street merchants came to us and said, "Hey, we'd like to try this. We'd like to close Linden for just short periods of time." Unfortunately, we didn't get to it until about August of last year, so I think they were closed from August to October. But also the difference between last year and this year was last year there were only a very few storefronts that were occupied on Linden. In the ensuing time, Linden has become almost fully occupied. There's 1 vacant storefront on Linden today. And all of these businesses, or the vast majority of them, are focused on attracting customers who are interested in music and entertainment and art. And so they came back to us this year and said, "We didn't get much of a try last year. Do you mind if we give it another try?" And we expanded it. So we do close the roadway from about 5 o'clock on Friday, intermittently until the end of the night on Sunday. And basically what the merchants have done is they've gone out, they've raised the money necessary to develop attractive barriers. We didn't want the sawhorses out there, the bright orange sawhorses. They went out, bought planted barriers to place in the roadway to let folks know it's closed. They've engaged to put entertainment on the street. I think this week kicks off the Live from Linden music series, so there'll be some events associated with that. The businesses are serving dinners out in the street and inviting people to bring dinners from around the corner. So if you go to Eddie O'Brien's or Parker's or the Red Dove, get it to go and bring it to Linden Street and sit and enjoy what's going on. So it's a wide open environment. So we're going to give that a test run this year. We're listening to feedback. Certainly we've got, as with everything, a lot of constituencies to balance. So there's folks who live on Linden Street, and when they bring home their groceries, they love to not have to walk 3 or 4 blocks to get them upstairs. And then we also have the downtown store, or the first floor storefronts that look to benefit from something like that. So what we'll do is at the end of the year take into account all of the feedback that we've received and come into next year with being nimble, looking at modifying the hours, expanding them, contracting them, charging or working on additional events, opening the place to more events, and really getting a better handle on what folks want down there. But so far, it's been an incredible success.
Now, Sage, I got to think that with the amount of feedback, and really both of you can touch on this, with the amount of community feedback that you're getting, it has to make your jobs easier to a certain extent, right? Because you have to do less of the thinking in some ways.
The feedback isn't always of consensus, so then you have to figure out, what is as a collective whole, work with the community to come to either if a consensus is needed, or in some cases there might be two opposing camps, and you have to work with them to figure out how they can get in the middle and kind of work something out. So it does and it doesn't. I mean, I think I love it. I mean, that's part of what makes a city government job great, is because it is a community team effort. It isn't just Matt and I sitting in a room deciding what to do. So I really appreciate that. But it definitely is, it's fun to learn how to work when there's two different sides, and that you have to really say, okay, you guys have the same goal. You want to make Geneva this really vibrant, wonderful place, but you see it in two different ways. You know, so our parklets, for example. Parklets, this is our second year, and they're on the street. They take up a parking space. So two different camps. This is a potential customer coming to my space. I want to make an outdoor, vibrant public space. They both want to make downtown Geneva vibrant and successful. Same goal, but they have two different ideas of how to make it work. And so how do you come together to have each other see different views? And so I think that's, for me, that's one of my jobs of seeing if I can have residents see things from other resident perspectives and see if we can get an overarching, if we're all marching towards like our comprehensive, a vision of our city that is positive and is beneficial for everybody. So it's more of a challenge, but I enjoy the challenge.
Well, I think it also builds in stakeholders, right? So if Sage and I just sit in a room and come up with what we read in our planning books as what we're supposed to be doing in downtowns these days, it's me, Sage, and the guy who wrote the textbook, and those are the stakeholders. But when a civic innovator or someone civically engaged comes in and says, "This is what I'm thinking," you know, rule number one for us is you can't just lay an egg. You don't come in and say, "You should do this," and go. That gets at the bottom of the pile. But if you come in and say, "I want to work with you to build this," Sage turned a great phrase a couple of years ago. It was like a shifting of the mindset from the city should to with the city's help we can, and that's really our mantra. That's what where we've built a lot of our successes is on the backs of the people who came up with the idea to begin with.
And the neighborhood associations, I think, are like the best example of making your job easy in terms of just they come up with the most fun, vibrant things that I could never think about, and that is particular to the people that live in the neighborhood and what they care about and what they want to celebrate. And so that I think is the most fun. That the Arbors neighborhood had a 4th of July parade, and it was fabulous. Two women were dressed up. One's Martha Washington, and the baseball team is marching behind them, and they're handing out pamphlets, and little kids are marching, and that's something I would never have thought of doing in your own neighborhood, and it was a hit, and everybody had a great time, and that's kind of the point. So it was really wonderful.
Well, we really appreciate you guys coming on today. Lots to talk about. I'm sure we'll be having you guys back on again in the future to talk more about these things as they develop.
Great. We love being here.
Thanks, Josh.
Yep. That's going to do it for us today. I'd like to thank Matt and Sage for sitting down with us and remind our viewers that next week we will have Del Lago Resort and Casino GM Jeff Babinski and VP of Human Resources Jerry Moran in studio to talk about the construction progress, jobs, hiring timelines, and much more. Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Time Warner Cable Channel 12. And, of course, the podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. For Matt Horn and Sage Gerling, I'm Josh Durso, reminding you to join us next week on another edition of Inside the FLX.